Welcome back everyone to part 2 of my list of top 15 bosses. Why was it 15? Well, we went through the list of bosses that was made and went through it from there. We ended up with 15 bosses exactly and couldn't remove any more, so just left it as a top 15. Just means I get to talk about more mods and more bosses, right? But first, look at this graph! No one cares, the night's gone forever. And today's sponsor is... no one! That makes things easier, doesn't it? Number 7 goes to Subspace Serpent from Secrets of the Shadows. Wait, what's this? A worm boss that doesn't default to worm AI? What? Well, yeah. Subspace was the first worm boss that didn't do the worm in a typical manner, and instead uses its body as more of an obstruction than anything. To be honest, this boss could just be a head and it would be able to do what it does. It never felt like a worm boss and has been considered a very unique take on what a worm can do. It doesn't have a lot of attacks, but what it does have, it does very well. The attacks themselves are pretty difficult, which are also pretty unforgiving. You really need to focus on this fight to avoid them with careful movements. Like the Shapes attack that makes you really pay attention. It's got such a tiny delay, it's really unforgiving if you make a mistake. Plus, in Phase 2, the things move! You've a charge with fast-moving projectiles with tiny gaps to slip through. Then in Phase 2, you've got a second wall with slow-moving projectiles. Then you've a barrage of worms. Think one extra worm is bad enough? How about 50? Then you Phase 2 that just becomes a memory game. It's way crueler than it looks, trust me. Then you've the phase transition with some of the tightest circling I've ever seen, with projectiles of its own cutting you off. This boss is so damn unforgiving to a fault. You need to be at Super Saiyan level instinct to do this thing without being hit. Number 6 goes to Ultimate Seth from Split.
Objection!
Objection! Anyways, Seth itself is a great fight, even if you ignore all those fancy effects, but where this boss really flourishes is its ultimate form.
It's harder, better, faster, stronger.
Its attacks are more deadly. Phase 2 has a brutal attack, leaving little room for error, and just damn, it looks so cool! This battle might not look overly complicated, but it still requires speedy reactions, leaving little room for error, meaning you'll feel that adrenaline kick as you get closer and closer to a win. Then you win, and the feeling's amazing! Still, that aside, you've plenty more to deal with, like the sword slashes with the speedier Phase 2 slash, void knives slashing your face, knives being shot out all over the place, or are those arrows? Hands trying to grab you to very kindly tell you to
Give me my money, Lebowski.
An attack correctly named Solar Zenith, I can see why, and the previously mentioned Dragon's Breath. As Chaos said though, if you remove all the flashy effects, you aren't left with much, but I only pay attention to the fights themselves anyways. The effects are just a bonus, and I tell you, I was flooded with adrenaline while fighting this thing, and I shall never forget that. Number 5 goes to Spirit of Purity Rematch from Elemental Unleash. Oh, Elemental Unleash. A mod that gives you 4 bosses of easy difficulty, but 2 of which have a pretty cool mechanic like Abomination only taking damage when you're inside the circle, and Spirit of Chaos where you need to make its lasers hurt itself. But then you've the 5th boss, and all of a sudden this mod becomes the embodiment of the devil himself. The rematch of Spirit of Purity is absolute hell to do, and being a tank won't save you. Spirit Rematch uses a life system where every hit you take is a life lost. You have to beat this thing with a limit of 10 hits or you die. Nothing can protect you from it. Furthermore, you can't melt it since it's only damaged from summoning probes, which only happens after its phase of attacks have all happened. Oh, and did I mention that this thing has a ton of attacks that get harder and harder as it progresses? Well, it does! With the last phase before the final phase being by far the cruelest of all the attacks. Do you have any idea the pain one feels after fighting a boss that needs insane focus for a solid 3 minutes, just to get back to the last phase and die? Or worse, die just as you reach that phase. It's agony! But it's fun. It's really fun. Plus, the final phase has a gimmick of attacking grey orbs. Upon damaging 3 orbs, a yellow orb will appear and follow a track from each of the 3 orbs. Damaging this yellow orb releases it from the tracks, but will move dependent on where it was hit, meaning you need to aim the orb at the boss while it's moving on the track, while miniature orbs are slowly flooding the arena, making it a bullet hell. It's such a good ending! It's old, but I love it so much. It doesn't feel like it's old either, it's just so well done for its time. Number 4 goes to Mutant from Fargo Souls. Come on, you all knew this would be here eventually. Everyone knows about Mutant at this point. The ludicrous amounts of attacks with varied variety, the speed, the different movements needed. No holding right to win here, folks. No guinea pig is beating this boss by holding a single direction. Since this boss is an amalgamation of vanilla bosses, it makes sense that Mutant has access to all of their attacks and abilities, and has the ability to summon them at will to help it in a fight. We'll skip phase 1 as it's more of a warm-up to the battle and isn't overly exciting. So in phase 2 it uses a set pattern of attacks, but upon entering phase 2, you've no idea which attack it's going to start with, so it's more of a surprise. But once that happens, you know exactly what the next attack will be as long as you know the pattern of attacks that Mutant uses. Though having a set pattern instead of random is certainly fine for a boss like this, since it has a ton of attacks to choose from summoning Duke Fishrons, Eye Cthulhu creating a star from Scythe, Destroyer chasing you while Mutant shoots you in the face with lasers, True Eyes keeping you busy while Mutant lobs a freaking nuke in the air, Empress of Light Blades, celestial pillars blowing up everywhere, slimes falling from the sky, and so much more. The fight is incredibly fast in terms of attacks and movement speed. There is never a dull moment here. It just goes on and on and on until you whittle its health down and then... Wait, it's still going? Yep! Mutant has a desperation phase where it becomes totally invulnerable and you need to survive all it's about to throw at you, with the final attack being a massive death ray that can and will one-shot you. So yeah, maybe don't get hit by that one. Mutant is by far one of the best bosses out there, but due to phase 1 and a few other personal factors, it belongs at number 4.
Number 3 goes to Polarities from the Polarities mod. Anyone remember this? Helium for Polarities. This is a reference that not everyone would get.
Well, now that just happened, you wouldn't expect 2 magnets to be this deadly. Well, they are, and I'm here to tell you why. The gimmick for this boss fight is the polarities don't exactly move per se. They're locked onto the player and move either closer or further away as the player moves. By getting closer to one makes that particular one move much slower, while the opposite one moves considerably faster. During this fight you need to battle with this movement system to make each attack work in your favour. So not only are you dealing with attacking and dodging, you also need to manipulate the boss's location in order to not immediately be erased from this plane of existence. Not only that, but it also has 3 phases and each phase has a completely new selection of attacks sharing very little with the previous phase, which I'd consider a bonus in my books. As for its attacks, the polarities prefer doing everything in close combat, normally forcing the player into a tight spot. Both bosses attack either together or one after the other, with a level of boss teamwork I've yet to see anywhere else. Like locking you into a small space and firing bolts at you, one firing lightning and the other having a large area around it made of mines. But the thing is here, you need to move closer or further away to get the correct place to avoid the lightning, so those mines are a lot more threatening than you might think. one creating a circle of electricity while bombarding you with projectiles, while the other one fires a death ray, which doesn't look too scary till you realise you need to move delicately or the laser will catch up to you if you circle too fast. Then this attack follows by the opposite one, creating a wall of mines, while the other one chases you with its own death ray. And the piece à la résistance, the magnetic field lines attacks. These things move around dependent on which of the polarities you're closest to, which also includes the speed and the size of the field lines. Want more? Well, here's phase 3 with probably one of the most deadly prediction death rays I've ever seen. Firing 4 death rays that linger, making for some really close calls as you move to trick them but also avoid the projectiles they fire. Lead this up with a circle thing lobbing projectiles at you, but here's the kicker. If you get hit by the blue projectiles, you get a debuff allowing the red ones to home in on you, and these things won't miss, I can promise you that. Then to end it all off, with the upgraded magnetic fields lines, which now last much longer and has a set of death rays in it, switching from damaging to safe. There is so much going on in this fight, it's fantastic. Plus, I just love the polarities mod, I can't help myself. Number 2 goes to Nihilus from Shadows of Abaddon. Did you know that Shadows of Abaddon could use your help? Well, if you're a decent spriter, go and have a word with Dan Yami. Remember that? I do. I have to suffer it every time I watch previous videos. Anyway, the one, the only, the boss that took over a year to rework. It's Nihilus! This boss went through testing hell during that time. But hey, here it is. Phase 1 is a little slow because of the lantern phases, but ignoring that to focus more on its attacks, they're all pretty good at keeping you away from Nihilus, which in true mode is where your DPS is limited depending on how close or far you are away, going all the way down to 0 if you're far enough away from the boss. This makes this fight one hell of an endurance battle, and true mode is the only way to fight this boss. I did expert because I felt no one wanted to watch a video that lasted more than 16 minutes. Boy, how wrong I was, eh? Its attacks consist of tentacles stabbing at you if you remain in range for too long, summoning massive waves of spikes that push you away, forcing you to jump over them. Oh yeah, and did I say that phase 1 removes your wings? Well, it does. It releases orbs that bounces around, plus a giant spiked orb upon where hitting the floor creates a massive spiked area. Plus it explodes after so many bounces, sending you flying if you're unobservant enough to notice that it's about to blow up in your face. It's got a roar that blows you back all the way to the other end of the arena if you're far too close. Then we have the lanterns having a variety of attacks of their own, either firing spikes at you, releasing slow-moving bouncing projectiles, releasing tons of flames orbiting around, which Nihilus himself can also do, and we've got a gigantic explosion! Then once you've done all that, phase 2 begins. Nihilus is now mobile, and now it's got a whole new arsenal to use against you, from fireballs leaving a long-lasting, lingering flame, spewing projectiles all over the place, boxing you in with colossal vines, balls that explode into rings of skulls, plus even more projectiles later on in the fight, surrounding unobservant players with spiked orbs that if destroyed would explode, stunning the player, letting Nihilus melt your face off. Likely one of the most dangerous charges I've ever seen, since Nihilus is huge and its charges are extremely fast. Plus it predicts player movements while the other one does not, so you've gotta pay attention to that one. And to add to its chaos, it summons small lanterns around itself, which increases its damage by 5%, 10% if you're in true mode. Plus, they can also attack. Then it has a platform attack, which has 3 different versions. The first one is 2 blasts from a horizontal and vertical angle. Later this turns into 4 shots, where the last 2 are both vertical and horizontal, which leaves a single gap you need to get into before it fires. Then you have the final version, which does 4 shots, the same as the previous one, but now it's a memory game. So I hope you're good at those. And did I mention that this attack can pretty much one-shot you? But then, we have the Extinction Ray. This attack happens after this bar is fully charged. This can be slowed down or stopped by destroying these 2 large lanterns. The Extinction Ray moves from one side of the arena to the other, while massive exploding flares rain from the sky. Giant rocks obstruct your path, which can also explode if damaged, plus getting hit by that death ray is an insta-kill no matter what. You're dead if that thing touches you. Though a useful part of this attack being, if Nihilus only has 5 or less lanterns, Eraser will counterattack after protecting you. This will stun Nihilus for a brief moment, allowing you to deal some free damage, which in true mode is a godsend. This thing is just loaded with attacks, some of which I didn't mention. There's so much dedication to this battle, and I know I'm judging these based on the fight and nothing else, but damn, look at those visuals! They're gorgeous! And number 1 goes to... Actually, before that, here are the honourable mentions. And, just because I want to make you all happy, here's a Calamity boss for you. Nighttime Providence. Because forcing a fight to nearly always last 4 minutes for one of the most lovable bosses in the mod with a chaotic attack pattern just worked. At least if you fight it properly without holding D the entire fight till it starts a cocoon. That's the only downside here. Spider Queen from SGA, because this thing is the most spideriest spider of all the spiders I have ever seen. Just look at those legs go! I mean, it wasn't really worthy on the list, but honourable mention, it's just, I don't know, there's something special about it. Sun Pixie and Eclipsey, because Lamp and Eclipse. Okay, not really, but they were both really good and I couldn't decide which one I wanted. And then I decided to just go with the polarities because in terms of enjoyment, I definitely enjoyed those much more. But Eclipsey and Sun Pixie are definite runners-up. And... Seaross? We're going to go with Seaross from Starlight River. What a fight this was! But since I wasn't going to support nice visuals and stuff for that list, I only focused on the fight. This is a pretty good fight, but sadly so much of it goes into those visuals, and since this list is not based on visuals and is based on fight, it just didn't make it. And number 1 goes to the Cataclysmic Armageddon boss fight! Okay, not really. But when am I ever going to have a chance to talk about this thing? The Cataclysmic Armageddon boss fight is something I would have loved to put on this list, but the trouble is it just wouldn't have been fair, because there probably would have been a bit of a bias since it was a boss dedicated to me, so I had to cancel that whole idea. But either way, I'm mentioning it now because I feel like I have to, because I don't think I'm ever going to have a chance to talk about this thing. I don't know, I love it! It's something dedicated to me! That feels fantastic when you know people have spent time and effort to make something for you. It's a fantastic feeling. Anyway, on to the real next boss. And number 1 goes to... Reiku from Maelstrom! Reiku! Finally I get to talk about this boss some more! Reiku is a satellite based on the Toho character of the same name. Now if you look closely you'll notice references to this all over Reiku's sprite, plus you'll see references in its attacks too. Reiku has 2 phases with non-stop barrages of many attacks with no rest in between. The speed it zips around while attacking makes it really hard to hit, making homing desirable. Unless you can aim, like I can't. It constantly alters the weather and wind. Many of his attacks are lightning related, even calling down bolts of lightning to fry you. Its bullet hells reduce your hitbox so they can be more compact but still fair, since Terraria's large player hitbox is normally really hard to make a bullet hell around. Phase 1 zips around firing projectiles everywhere, enters a bullet hell phase where it spews out projectiles, flies around at insane speeds while shooting out circuit lightning at you, summons minions, teleports around and bombards you with missiles. Then after getting Reiku's health down, it teleports above you, repairs itself as a big old flex, then goes back on the offensive. It's now even faster and way more aggressive, with all of its attacks being new and sharing nothing with the previous phases. It's now one seriously peeved off satellite that wishes for nothing more than for your head to be mounted on its wall. Reiku will now blast you with balls of lightning, calling lightning from the sky, erupting with curving lightning, calling large satellites from above, spew even more lightning, hide in the background and attack you from the foreground. But oh, you think it's over? Well, okay, yeah, got you! It's got one more attack. Once it's defeated, it enters a desperation attack, where it goes into the background and fires the biggest goddamn laser you've probably ever seen in a 3D perspective. And you think it's over? Okay, yeah, it actually is this time. But Heavy Lobster never left Raikou where it is. I bet you noticed the sprites changing between footage. Well, that's because it's been upgraded since then in many, many ways, and is by far one of the best bosses I have ever had the pleasure of fighting. It's a bit of a cheat because I'm also including unreleased Raikou to pass my judgment, but yeah, it'll be out eventually, making this more valid. The boss is amazing. There is just no other way to put it. It's amazing. And to make things even better, there is a master mode version that is totally different from the expert version. And I honestly cannot wait for this thing to be finished so I can show it off to you all, because it is amazing. Anyway, there you have it. My top 15 bosses list. I hope you enjoyed watching. Though I need to question if you really were here for the content, the theme of what was going on here, or the voice that brought you here today. Either way, who cares? As long as you enjoyed it, that's good enough for me. I need to give a massive thank you to Astrum Genesis and Chaos for assisting me with this whole thing. They did a fantastic job making this a lot easier to do. And since when it comes to my work giving me limited time, their assistance made this so much easier to get done right. Thank you to both of you. Anyways, I'm pretty bad at intros, so I'm just gonna say, ta-ra.